So I just first off want to say thank you both for coming. And it is an honor to be on the same stage with two people as distinguished as you two are. As we have for all the sessions, we are taking questions via Twitter. So I'll work through a variety of questions from the audience. And actually, the first one that has come in is a question that we can have both of you field, is can emerging countries really emerge while they don't authentically embrace the liberal ideas that developed in the 18th century?
Well, I'd say that, it depends what you mean by emerge. But as David pointed out, or I think you did, Singapore was once an extremely poor country and is now quite rich. Actually, its average income is higher than the United States. And yet, it doesn't have the full character of a liberal society. I mean, they won't let you chew chewing gum in Indonesia, for example. You get whipped. So, after the initial liberalism of Britain and Holland, the United States, and so forth, you can be a tyranny and still get the advantage of modern electricity, say. So that would be my first.
Also, I want to distinguish, as you may not, between democracy and liberalism. Because I would have said that a country that does not have democracy but does have free markets and such, and is lucky in its dictator, can progress. That China, when Deng was more or less running it, even though he wasn't officially running it, was doing quite well because he was mostly making the right decision. It's doing less well now because his successors are making fewer of the right decisions. And of course, democracies can make the wrong decisions. So there are many examples. That particular election, there were no good alternatives. But the question was, did you have a candidate who you're sure would be moderately bad or one who might be very bad? And we got the latter. But in any case, I think those are separate issues. And of course, since I'm an anarchist, I don't really believe in democracy. I believe in carrying liberalism all the way to the point where we have the same rights as the government, where the people who are enforcing rights have the same rights as the people they're enforcing them against.
Well, I think it's very important, the point that David made, that private property is not dependent on the government. Now, that's what the king claims all the time, but it's a lie.
So the next question we have from Twitter is, how much credit do you give to imperialism as opposed to capitalism in the success of the West?
Oh, David, why don't you take it?
I would say that the success of India may have benefited by imperialism. It's hard to tell. They certainly have a better railroad system than the other parts of the world. I don't think that the Western countries benefited by it. Switzerland is quite a rich country at the moment, and it somehow managed to never acquire any colonies. And Spain was one of the most successful imperialist powers, and it's one of the poorer of the Western nations. Whether imperialism ran at a profit at all, I don't think we know. I've seen it argued that England lost money running the empire. And given that everybody in that argument has an axe to grind, I don't know what the right answer is. But I think one of Orwell's mistakes was, George Orwell, somebody I'm very fond of, but he was wrong about some things, and he believed that the British Empire was a profit-making enterprise, and that the British, when they gave up the empire, would have to settle for being poorer.
Yeah, and of course he was in the Burmese police after he graduated from a minor English public school, and that's really all that most British people got from the empire. They could go maybe be one of the few administrators in the empire. But I must say, on the calculation side, I think it's rather plain that empire doesn't make you rich. Certainly in the British case, half of the Navy was paid to protect the sea routes to India. Now, if India were this jewel in the empire that was making a lot of money for Britain, that would be sensible, but it was not. There was essentially free trade between India and Britain. And you're perfectly right about the Spaniards, and the Portuguese for that matter, but especially the Spaniards, who made a ton of money under Charles and Philip out of the New World, and then spent it on war.
Our next question is, in certain countries, illiberal democracies have replaced liberal ones, in brackets, Hungary, Poland. So do you think people have more of an appetite for feeling powerful, supporting majoritarian democracy, rather than feeling free?
Well, I was just in Hungary before the disastrous election that they had. So it's clear that people will vote for security or to attack the Jews or for whatever crazy promises people like Trump or Orban make. And that's an underlying problem. People care more about security than about being free. And this is our job, is to persuade them that freedom is good for them in every way. It's a tough road, so be strong.
The problem, in a sense, with democracy is that there is no reason why it is in the self-interest of the individual voter to devote very much resources for deciding how to vote, because individual voters have very small effect. And the result is that what drives voting is what I think of as free information, what everybody knows. And of course, what everybody knows may or may not be true. So one of the ways of trying to improve the world is to change the mix of what everybody knows, whether by writing a persuasive novel or by teaching college students who will go on to teach other people, or what we're doing at the moment, preaching. And it may not be a very good way, but I'm not sure there's a better.
Well, among my heroes is the American journalist H.L. Mencken in the early 20th century. And he said this about democracy. Democracy is the theory that the people deserve what they want.
Know what they want.
Know what they want.
Get it.
Good and hard.
Know what they want.
So on that note, in terms of literature and liberalism more generally, we have a great question here that says, what is the best book on liberalism ever written, and you can't pick one of your own?
Well, wait.
You can pick each other's.
There'll be a small side payment.
I haven't read all 3 volumes. So no, it's a good question, but I don't think I have a good answer to it, because that is Mencken is wonderful, but he's not very organized. So Smith is very good, but Smith didn't know the economics we now know. I'm not sure there is a good one book. But I'll tell you, the best thing on liberalism is the internet. You just have to be selective about which parts.
That's true. But there is one figure that I think you'll agree with, David, and that's Bastiat. Read the essays of Bastiat. And I was in a hotel in the south of France, which had once been a boys' school, actually a military school, and there was a statue of Bastiat, who had been a student there, and he died of tuberculosis, as so many people did in the 19th century. But wouldn't you say that he would be some of his essays are just terrific.
He wrote some very good essays, but so did other people.
I know, it's not a big...
There isn't a one book.
That's true. Although, by the way, a good start is his dad's Capitalism and Freedom. which one of the great heroes of the modern world, Tom Palmer, used to smuggle in to the Soviet Union.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if anyone's ever had the chance to meet Tom and hear the stories of smuggling illegal literature into the Soviet Union, it's pretty inspiring. Here's I guess a bit of a policy question. What is one kind of liberty-related idea or subject you would like to see changed most urgently in your lifetime?
That is, abolishing the war on drugs would be one very big one. And abolishing government, in my country, abolishing government control over K through 12 education by instituting a full voucher system. Those are probably the two biggest single issues that occur.
Well, I'd certainly want to abolish let me add to the abolitionism here, another piece of slavery, which is the minimum wage, which was instituted 100 years ago in order to hurt immigrants, to prevent immigrants from the United States, such as David's grandparents and my great-grandparents, from prospering in the United States, to keep the jobs for the local people. And it's done a very good job of causing unemployment.
So from the policy area to maybe a little more philosophical, can we expect a society without a state to fragment into small tribes? Any prediction on what this would look like in the modern world?
There are some ways in which a society with a state fragments into small tribes. You can see it very clearly on the internet, but in general, that people have some tendency to form into bubbles, into groups of people who talk to people who agree with them. But I don't see why that would happen any more in a stateless society. That one of the reasons to form tribes is in order to get the government to do good things for you and your friends, and that reason disappears in a fully market society.
And I should point out, I think David again would agree, that we have in many ways stateless sub-societies all over the place. In science, well, there's the National Science Foundation, but in science, in the arts, thankfully we don't have a government commissar of rock music. That would be a true disaster for rock, although I don't pay attention to popular music after 1959, but still. So there, what's alarming about China these days is its movement to a real technologically driven totalitarianism where they do have commissars of rock music.
So what is your take on intellectual property and its limits?
I think there are arguments both for and against it. There is an interesting book against intellectual property by Leibowitz and Margolis, if I remember correctly. I think they overstate their case a bit, but they make an argument, and they offer some evidence that patent law actually slowed the development of the steam engine rather than increasing it, and a bunch of other stuff. But I like to say that that libertarians are divided into two groups. The ones who think that intellectual property is the most fundamental and most justifiable form of property, that I think was Ayn Rand's position, and the ones who think it's the least defensible form of property, and I'm just about the only libertarian who's in neither group.
I'm in group number 2, and it was partly that book you mentioned that persuaded me. The main problem with intellectual property, and the reason in Old or Hebrew Bible terms that I regard it as an abomination for which people ought to be stoned, is democracy. is the problem that you can go to the United States Congress and extend the term. The spectacular example that David, I'm sure, knows more about than I is the so-called Mickey Mouse Protection Act. When was it? 1998, I think, where the copyright, which is the same as a patent, on Mickey Mouse was about to expire. The length of the copyright was already 50 years after the death of the creator, namely Walt Disney. The United States Congress, in its wisdom, after accepting, shall we say, campaign contributions from the Walt Disney Corporation, increased the term of all copyrights to 70 years. If we had, I don't know, choose a number. It's hopeless. There's no optimal number to choose. But choose a number, 10 years, say, for copyright and patents. And then somehow get around trolls, and then make it constitutional so it can't be changed, but not with democracy.
But in fact, copyright is being changed because it's becoming unenforceable due to technological change.
So we talked about like if you could change one thing. We'll close on this, which is a bit of a reflection. What is one thing that has changed in your lifetime in terms of liberty that makes you the proudest or the happiest?
The abolition of the draft, probably, in the U.S.
Legal equality for women.
All right, well, thank you both again for coming all the way to Belgrade to speak to us. Like I said when we first got out here, it's very rare that we get to have two individuals as distinguished as yourselves to share the same stage and to share your thoughts with our students. So thank you from everyone at SFL, and please give them a warm round of applause.